Okay, so recording started. So those of you who wants to stay anonymous, feel free to remove your last name or your name and turn your video off. So today we have, give me a second here. Yeah. So first of all, today's presentation is a way to defeat cyber criminals and malware. So today's presentation is about the malicious hackers and their malware creation are rampant on the internet. Ransomware is taking down companies, hospitals, and even entire cities at will. Hundreds of millions of dollars are stolen. Millions of people accounts are stolen every day. A large portion of the internet is just hacker traffic, phishing, and their malware programs. However, most people are unaware that we can significantly reduce internet crime, making it nearly impossible for hackers and their malware creation to be successful. There is a way to make a far safer internet for you, your children, your grandchildren, and your grandparents. We have most of the needed technology. We just need to make it more pervasive. And our speaker today is Mr. Roger Grimes. He's a Chief Information Security Officer. He's sole advisor for Know Before Inc. He's a 38-year-old security consultant, instructor, holder of dozens of computer certification, and author of 15 books. Wow. And over 1,500 articles on computer security. He has spoken at many of the world's biggest computer security conferences, been in Newsweek magazine, appeared on television, been interviewed for NPR, all things considered, the Wall Street Journal, and been a guest on dozens of radio shows and podcasts. He has worked at some of the world's largest computer security companies, including Foundstone, McAfee, and Microsoft. He has consulted for hundreds of companies, from the largest to the smallest around the world. He specializes in host and network security, quantum security, identity management, anti-malware, hackers, honeypot, public key, public key infrastructure, cloud security, cryptography, policy, and technical writing. Wow, impressive. His certification has included CPA, CISSP, CISA, CISM, CEH, MCSE, Security, Security Plus, and yada yada others. He has a sense of humor, and he has been an instructor for many of them. His writing and presentation are often known for real-world, contrarian views, and he was the weekly security columnist for InfoWorld and CSO magazine between 2005 and 2019. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you so much, Vincent, and thank you, and thanks for having me here. There's some of my books, and this title and what I'm talking about actually comes from my latest book. My 15th book is called Taming the Hacking Storm, and this is that talk. I'm actually working on the 16th one right now that's called How AI and Quantum Impact Cyber Threats and Defenses. But the book I care most about is Taming the Hacker Storm because it's a solution for significantly fixing internet crime. And it's something I've been writing about for over 20 years. I've had it reviewed by NIST, NSA, CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, and a lot of people in those groups have reviewed it and said, yes, it would work. But I haven't been able to get it implemented. And let me say, it's just really tough to get anything implemented on the internet today. And I have a friend that did get an internet security standard pass. He helped create and pass DMARC. If you're familiar with DMARC, SPF, and DKIM, they're anti-phishing standards for email. And it's the only internet security standard that's been adopted worldwide since 1993. In 1993, SSL was passed by Netscape. Since then, there's not been a single internet security standard that was adopted worldwide till DMARC. And I asked my friend that helped invent it, how did you get it passed? What did you do? And he said, I talked to a lot of groups. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm going around and sharing my idea with hundreds of groups. This is probably my 50th talk on this topic in the last couple of months. And I'm just trying to share the ideas that we can fix the internet. I think a lot of us, especially the longer you've been in this career, you kind of think that, you can't fix it. People try to sell you stuff and they're like, well, but just buy this or buy this and we'll be able to defeat hackers and malware. And none of it ever works. Every single cybersecurity defense in my 38-year career has failed. And I think it makes most people think that the hackers will always win and that we're always in some losing fight. But it is not true. We can absolutely win. We can significantly defeat hackers and malware. We're just not doing what it takes to do that. But what I want to hope to share today with you is let you come away with the idea of knowing that we can defeat hackers and malware. We really can. And this is just one of the possible solutions. And we don't have to accept that hackers are just in our lives and always messing up everything. But I want to share my solution. I think it's the best solution, but I've heard about other solutions. I want to share mine tonight over the next 30, 45 minutes. And start by talking about how bad it is. Then we'll talk about the main underlying problem that I finally identified that we needed to solve to fix internet security problems, my solution, and then some other needed solutions we'll talk about. But how bad is internet crime? Well, there's over 1.2 billion websites worldwide and over 250,000 added every single day, and 10% of them are malicious. 10%, one out of every 10 websites are malicious. And Google says that on average, the average malicious website exists for 10 minutes or less. The website is created when a victim usually clicks on like a phishing email or something. When they click on that link, it creates the website dynamically. It then tries to phish the user out of their login credentials or get them to download malicious content or both. And then it destroys itself within 10 minutes. So it's very difficult for any of the cybersecurity vendors to, like blocklist any particular websites because there's a quarter of a million of them being made every day, and they only last for 10 minutes. So it's very difficult to find and put down websites because they're putting themselves down. Most internet traffic is malicious. If you didn't know that, most traffic on the internet is malicious. 73% of all internet traffic is malicious. That means we're all paying for high-speed internet and 5G internet to our phones to support mostly hackers and malware. And I think that should make everybody mad. If we were able to get rid of all the hacking and malware, we could make our internet three times faster. So that's pretty wild. And a large portion of that comes from bots. Automated bots are always traveling around and doing bad things. Most email is malicious. 57% of all sent emails are malicious. Most of them don't end up in our inbox. Only 1 out of 7 ends up in our inbox. And that's because Google and Microsoft and all of us have software that is blocking, that's deleting the spam, filtering out the phishing, that sort of stuff. But 57% of all sent emails are malicious. Most emails are malicious. Social engineering is the biggest reason why people are hacked. Social engineering that gets past every technical defense, gets past the firewalls, gets past the antivirus, gets past everything you put in its place. 70 to 90% of all internet crime involves social engineering. And Barracuda Network said that while spear phishing is a special type of social engineering where the hacker is targeting a particular person or a group they belong to. So they're targeting you or they're targeting a group you belong to, like C-level officers of a company. While spear phishing emails make up less than 0.1%, less than 0.1% of all email attacks, spear phishing is responsible for 2/3 of all successful attacks. I mean, if you think about that, that's a pretty wild statistic. Really crazy to think that one thing, spear phishing, is responsible for the vast majority of successful data breaches. A lot of texting is malicious. I'm not sure if it's all of it. I don't know about you. I oftentimes feel like most of the SMS messages I get on my phone are malicious. People, every day people are getting them saying their account is locked or they have to log into their bank account or the Fed Express can't deliver the package, whatever it might be. So there's actually more than 1 billion unwanted SMS messages per minute, and 1 million of them are intentionally malicious, not just spam. Tech Jury states that 8.9 to 14.5% of people that get these malicious messages click on them. So that's pretty wild to think somewhere around 10 or 15% of people that get these fake messages believe them and click on them and interface with them. Google Mandiant said that 33% of data breaches involve software and firmware vulnerabilities. And last year we had over 40,000 separately publicly announced vulnerabilities. Every year is a new record, though. This year, in 2025, we're on record to do 47,000 separate publicly announced vulnerabilities. That's like 133 a day, day after day after day, year after year after year. And, that's a lot of software and firmware that we all have to patch. So that's a big problem. There's over 1 billion individual malware programs out there and about 500,000 new ones created and detected every day. Just a lot of badness. And all of that badness compromises a lot of people and a lot of companies. And this is a wild statistic that at first I didn't believe, that 40% of organizations experience at least one data breach a year. 40%, 4 out of 10. And when I first saw this statistic, I thought it had to be wrong. So I did a lot more researching on it, and 40% was the lowest figure I could find. Some of them were in the 60s and 70%. I couldn't find any figures on the percentage of organizations that get breached every year that was lower than 40%. And recently, I read a Forrester report. Forrester Research is considered one of the better research firms in the world. They said 67% of companies are breached at least once a year, and the average company is breached 2.8 times a year. I mean, if there's any surprise in my 38-year career, it's how bad hacking is and that we're still not doing anything different. That is the big shocker to me. I would have thought that if hacking was this bad, that we would be trying something different, but we're not. We keep trying the same stuff, firewalls and antivirus and endpoint detection and response and intrusion detection and all that stuff that does not work. And let me say, this is not a new thing. In the 1990s, I started to ask myself, why do we have so many hackers and malware programs, and why is it getting worse every year? Because it was bad back then. And I thought, and I could see that it was growing. And I was like, why is it growing? Well, certainly the internet is part of it, right? I mean, we had hackers and malware before the internet. We had computer viruses that would spread around the world without the internet, but it took a year or two. And there was a lot of hacking, but it was dial-up modems and stuff like that. And it just wasn't like it is today. So the internet's part of it. The internet reaches into 1 billion people's lives, and it makes 1 billion potential victims every day. But, you and I are on the internet, and we're not hacking people and doing internet crime. So I asked myself, why? Well, why is there so much internet crime? And I'm embarrassed to think about it now, but it took me a couple of years to figure out the answer because it was so readily apparent. Duh, I said. It's because we can't stop, identify, block, or arrest hackers. A hacker can send a phishing email and claim to be anybody. They can claim to be Bill Gates. They can claim to be Facebook tech support. They can claim to be your boss. They can claim to be the tax department. They can claim to be a cop. They can claim to be anyone and try to hack you. And there's nothing we can do. The best we can do is possibly try to stop the current attack, but then they can just come back. They can pretend to be somebody else in another email. They can attack 1 billion other people. Because we cannot identify them to their true human identity, they can commit crime and never suffer any bad consequences. And with AI deep fakes, it's just going to get worse because anybody can pretend to be anybody.
I'm the supposedly famous Bill Gates, but I'm only famous because I listen to what this guy, Roger Grimes, tells me. Without him, I'm a nerd begging for dollars on the street.
I used to work for Bill Gates at Microsoft for 11 years. I wish I could show him this video. But, anybody can claim to be anyone and not ever be caught and charged with a crime because we don't know who they are. So in real life, if you rob a bank. Like in America, we had 1,263 bank robberies in 2023. It actually has been getting lower and lower every year since the 1990s. But half of all bank robbers in America get caught during the first bank robbery and put in jail. Almost all of the others continue robbing banks till they get caught and put in jail. When they get caught, they get identified, they get charged with the crime, they get taken to court, and they get put in jail. And if they get out and they rob again, they get caught, identified, charged, put in jail longer. And because most bank robbers get caught and charged and put in jail, it's a very big disincentive for you and I to rob banks, right? Like even if we're down on our luck and we don't have any money, we most likely are not going to go rob a bank because we don't want to go to jail and we don't want that on a resume that we're a bank robber felon. But online, you're almost never going to get caught. You're never going to get identified. And if you're never going to get caught or identified, you're going to get pretty good at robbing banks. You're going to get pretty good at robbing things online and robbing people online. It's all profit and very little risk. And suppose you're a mostly ethical person and you don't want to rob or hurt people, but you're watching your friend. You're in India, you're in Ukraine, you're in Russia, and you're trying to be a good person, but you're seeing your friend be an internet criminal and he's just getting rich. He's buying jewelry, buying cars, having girlfriends, going to the bars, and he's never getting in trouble. That would be a very big incentive to make the person that's trying to be ethical during a hard time become an internet bank robber. So that is what I came to the conclusion. The reason why internet crime is so bad and getting worse year after year after year is because we cannot identify who someone is. They can claim to be anyone. They can send you software and claim that it's a Microsoft patch update. They can claim to be Facebook tech support and you need to install this update or whatever. And we don't know by default who they are or whether that software is the right software. And we can't identify them, so we can never block them because they can just pretend to be Bill Gates the next day and be Steve Jobs. Well, God rest in peace, Steve Jobs, but be somebody else the next day and never get caught, never get arrested, never suffer any penalty. Again, all profit, very little risk. So that's the main problem. Why internet crime is so bad is that we cannot stop internet criminals. We cannot reliably block them because they can just hit us with a different attack 10 times a day and come back the next day. We can't identify them. We certainly can't punish them or arrest them. And oftentimes they're in other countries. So even if we could identify them, they're in some other country and we would not be able to arrest them anyways because our laws and warrants and legal jurisdictions don't apply to them. And let me say vice versa. You know, China and Russia is not going to arrest somebody just because the Americans want them arrested. And let me say the Americans and Canada aren't going to arrest somebody just because China and Russia says to arrest them. So that's what I identified as the main problem. And my solution fixes that problem. In real life, if someone's coming to tell you something or ask you for money, if it's something important, you can say, I need to know who you really are. Like in America, you get stopped by a police officer and they need to know your identity. You have to show them your driver's license from the DMV. If I'm going to travel, I might have to show my passport. If somebody is asking me for money, if I say I'm from KnowBe4, I would have to prove that I really am from KnowBe4 in real life. So in real life, we're able to minimize how much crime is committed against us because we can ask somebody to prove, are you really that person when you're asking for money or when you get stopped for a speeding ticket? Or if you're trying to get me to do something, I can make you prove who you are or prove if that software is what it is. And we don't have that online, right? And if you ask somebody, like if somebody's asking me for money, maybe they come to my door and they say they're for a charity. We're collecting for the American Cancer Society. I can say, can you prove that this money is going to go to the American Cancer Society? And if they can't, I can say, well, I'm not giving you any money. In the real world, we can ask to see their real identity or to prove that they're with a particular organization before we continue doing business with them. So that's my solution that I actually created online. And I call the solution pervasive selective trust, because everything we do is about trust or lack of trust, right? If you know, someone comes to our door and claims to be a police officer or Canadian Mountie, we want to see that they're in a uniform, that they have a badge and ID, and maybe it's someone faking being a Canadian Mountie or being a police officer. But most of the time, if they have the right uniform and the right ID, it is who they say they are. If we order a pizza, if I order a pizza from Domino's Pizza, and somebody shows up at my door in a Domino's Pizza uniform and they have a Domino's Pizza sign on the car, I'm going to think that person's with Domino's, and they usually are, right? Because I trust that I called Domino's, that they made me a pizza, and the pizza's not going to poison me, and that the person showing up at my door is a Domino's Pizza person, and they're not there to rob me. Our life is full of trust. We fall in love with people that we trust. And if we no longer trust our spouses, we get divorces. Everything we do in life, in real life, is about trust. And so I want to put that back into the internet, because right now there is very little trust on the internet. So, and again, trust is someone or something that you're interacting with being who they say they are and acting as expected. If we trust them, we don't expect them to hurt us or harm us in some way. So trust is, are you who you say you are? And in an online way, is that program, service, app, link, file, a phone number, message, or content what it says it is? If that file says that it's a Microsoft update, is it really a Microsoft update? If you tell me you're with Facebook tech support, are you really with Facebook tech support? That's what I'm trying to put back in the internet. And to do that, I have to make it harder for hackers to hide their true identity. So here, this statement right here is really the bulk. I've got a lot to my solution, but that the second sentence is the most important part of my solution. And is that it allows anyone to validate anyone else's true identity to their human identity when they're getting ready to interact, if desired. So if I connect to my bank, to Bank of America could say, I want you to prove that you're Roger Grimes before you can withdraw money online or send money to someone. And I term this true identity real ID. And I'm not sure if Canada has a real ID concept, but in America, we have this real ID. If you want to travel in an American airport, you have to have this real ID, and it's this assured identity. Well, I want the same sort of thing on the internet. I want people on the internet that if someone asks for you to prove your identity or what company you belong to, that you would have to give them the online digital equivalent of a real ID. And that's a secure identity that is strong authentication. Maybe it's, multi-factor authentication. Maybe it's like a YubiKey or something, FIDO YubiKey or something like that. That is strongly tied to your human identity, and you had to show up in person to get it. It's difficult for a hacker to steal and use somewhere else. Like a FIDO YubiKey, my private key is on a chip on this, and unless the hacker steals this physical device, they have a very hard time stealing my identity because it's a private key stored on a cryptographic chip. Well, a real ID would be the same thing. It would be a strongly assured, strong authentication identity, multi-factor authentication, phishing resistant. It'd be difficult for the hacker to steal and use somewhere else. It's tied to a real identity and or company. So if I say I'm Roger Grimes from KnowBe4, it would be in that identity. And again, a person must show up in person to get it. Like in America, to get a driver's license at our DMVs, Department of Motor Vehicles, everybody must show up in person. Well, I would say the same thing to get an online real ID. You would have to show up in person, prove who you say you are before you get this online digital real ID, along with some other components of trust that I'm going to cover during the next 10, 15 minutes. And overall, I call this solution a pervasive high trust ecosystem, so that we get a system of trust built into the internet, a pervasive system of trust in the internet that will replace this pervasive anonymity that it has today where anybody can claim to be anybody. I can go on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and claim to be Bill Gates. Bill Gates, 1962, and as long as that ID has not been taken by somebody else, I can get that ID and start trying to fool people into thinking I'm Bill Gates. So in my solution, there's two types of identities, two major types of identities. There's the real ID, again, strong authentication, strongly assured, tied to a real human identity, and everything else. So today, most of the internet stuff that we have, like if you have a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram account, you go to most websites, you put in your login name, you make up a login name, it has to be unique, and you make up a password, and then it sends an email to your personal email address and says, click here to verify. Well, that's just verifying that your personal email is correct. And that's not really strong assurance. Again, I can go to Facebook, and when it says, what would you like your ID to be? I can say, I want to be Bill Gates, Bill William Gates, 1962. And as long as it's not taken up by somebody else, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram will let me have that. So most identities on the internet are known as pseudo identities. They're not, your real identity is not required. It's not validated. But there are strong identities on the internet, or like KnowBe4. When I went to work for KnowBe4 in America, they require that you prove that you're an American citizen. And I had to bring in my driver's license, my real ID, before KnowBe4 gave me my email address of Roger, my login name and email address of rogerg@knowbe4.com. That's a strongly assured identity, and I had to show up in person. If I want to go to work for the United States government, I get what's called a CAC card, CAC, CAC card, and that requires you show up in person, and you actually have to get fingerprinted, and you may have to give DNA today. It's a strongly assured identity. But most of the stuff that we use is really weak. And sometimes it could be anonymity, right? Attempted anonymity. I don't think there's no such thing as true anonymity on the internet, but you can try to be anonymous on the internet. And I can claim to be anyone, if I want to be in a lot of cases. So in my solution, on every connection, anyone can choose what major type of identity to use or require from the other side for the connection to go forward. So they can say, I want to require that you show me your real ID. And you could say, yes, I'll agree to that or not. Bank of America can say, before you can connect to me, you need to prove that you're Roger Grimes. And I can agree to provide that real ID, or say, nope, I'm going to go bank somewhere else that doesn't require the real ID. That's the main part of my solution. And again, it has to do with what's called identity proofing. Can I prove who you are? Can I prove your identity? And every identity service provider, and an identity service provider is someone that gives you a digital ID. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, your company, Gmail, Hotmail, Microsoft, they're supposed to do a little bit of identity proofing before they give you that ID, but most of them are very weakly assured. All they do is send an email to your private email address. You click yes on that, and they're like, yes, you're verified. They're weak assurance. But again, strong assurance would be like at KnowBe4, I had to show up in person, bring my driver's license, prove who I was before I got. That would be strong assurance. Well, and let me say that we all have different IDs for different things, for work and personal, right? I have a KnowBe4 account, and I have my personal email account, and any internet trusted identity ecosystem will have to support these multiple personas per person. Persona is just, an attestation of a particular digital identity. Like here's an example. In this case, persona A is my real ID that I use at KnowBe4. KnowBe4 gave me the email address, rogerg@knowbe4.com. They verified who I am by requiring that I show up in person. I had to bring my driver's license. Persona B could be a real ID that I use with my personal email address, rogerg@banneretcs.com. That's my personal domain. And maybe that even has some other things, like it says, yes, I'm older than 21, so I can buy wine or beer on the internet. Whereas my persona A was tied to KnowBe4 and said my age of 58, or maybe had my date of birth or something like that. Persona C and D is just my pseudo identities. It looks like Persona C is my ex Twitter account for know before, but it's not a highly verified account. Persona D is my Gmail account. Again, it's not a real ID account. It's just a pseudo identity at Gmail that I use. And maybe I have a Persona E where I'm sometimes trying to be anonymous. Maybe I'm connecting to a cancer support group, or maybe I'm going to an Alcoholics Anonymous, support group, or I'm going to a political protest, and I don't want the people knowing who I am. So in my system, we could use different IDs and personas to connect to different things. Like maybe I would be required to use my persona A tied to KnowBe4 to log on to the KnowBe4 network and my KnowBe4 YouTube and X accounts. I use my persona B real ID to connect to my bank and to my stock account and my health insurance accounts. Thank goodness in Canada, you know how to deal with those with those health insurance accounts. But I use my persona C to connect to my KnowBe4 X accounts, my KnowBe4 Facebook accounts, my KnowBe4 Instagram accounts. But then my persona D is my pseudo identity, my Gmail account. I just use that to go to my personal YouTube account. And then maybe sometimes, again, I'm anonymous. I want to be anonymous for my cancer support group or political protest, or maybe I'm connecting to a cryptocurrency bank or something like that. In my system, everybody could choose which ID, what type of ID that they use to connect, or that the site of the service I connect to could require whether we use real ID or not. Although we do need more than trusted user IDs. We need a whole pervasive, trusted ecosystem. We really need trusted devices, trusted operating systems, trusted applications, trusted actions, trusted networks, and something called trust assurance services. The trusted devices, operating systems, applications, actions, and networks actually already exist. We just need to use them. And we don't have to invent anything new. Even trusted identities, we don't have to invent them. We have real ID, digital IDs online that we could use if we wanted to. Trusted assurance services is something brand new I'll talk about in a minute. That's something that would be brand new. That's like a DNS of the internet, but for internet security. I call all of these the trust stack. And you're either going to have all those things and have a full trust stack, or you're not. So in my system, there's 3 trust assurance levels. There's two high security trust systems that are identical to each other with one change. Level 2 and 3 are the highest levels of security, and they require that you have a complete trust stack and a real ID to be in level 2 or 3. The only difference between levels 2 and 3 is that level 3 is controlled by your government. Over here, the US government would control our level 3. In Canada, the Canadian government would control level 3. But a lot of people say, hey, I don't want my government in my business at all. I don't want my government looking at anything I'm doing. I don't want them to know who I am. I don't trust the government. And let me say, there's lots of reasons not to trust your government, especially these days. And if you're a person that doesn't want the government involved, cool, you can use level 2. Level 2 and 3 are the same level of security controls, with the only difference being that level 3 is controlled by your government. And level 2 could be an open source community that controls it, or maybe Microsoft and Google and stuff like that are involved. It's not defined, but all we know is level 2, the government's not involved. But every nation would have its own level 3. China would have a level 3. Russia would have a level 3. And I'm respecting that the governments really do have the highest control, the highest legal jurisdiction, right? In America, I can't get a U.S. government security clearance unless they want me to have one. And it's the same thing with most nation state governments. And then level 1 is everything else. Level 2 and 3 requires that you have the complete trust stack that I just talked about, including a real ID. And if you don't have all of those things, you're in level 1. And anytime you connect to a site or service, they can require that you be at one of these levels on a per connection basis. Your device, your computer, could actually run separate connections at different levels. Like, so maybe on my computer, I'm using trust assurance level 1 to connect to Instagram or something like that, or maybe I'm trying to be anonymous. I could also, if I was doing a government job, have a connection using, a website or an application that connects to a government work site, level 3. Like in America, for me to look at my Social Security benefits, I have to connect to SSA.gov. That's the Social Security Administration website. And it requires that I connect using a highly assured government digital ID to connect to see my Social Security benefits. But not every connection on my computer do I have to have that or use that. And in my system, you could have different levels, different trust assurance levels on a per connection basis. So again, maybe level 3, I'm connecting to some government work site. But then when I'm connecting to my bank and stock accounts, maybe it's level 2 account, but I also have a level 2 account for KnowBe4. And in my solution, every device is capable of having simultaneous different connection levels to different types of services. Each device can participate and connect to multiple trust assurance levels on a per connection, site, service, instance basis. So again, if you look at kind of across the internet, you'd have all these different devices, some connecting at levels 1, 2, and 3, some just connecting at level 1, some at levels 1 and 2, some at levels 1 and 3. And it's really how you connect is determined by the service, more than likely by the service that you connect to. If I connect to Bank of America, they may say, hey, you have to be a level 2 to connect to the bank and withdraw. Maybe they allow me to be level 1 to look at my bank balance, but then requiring to be level 2 to withdraw or transfer money or something like that. But if I connect to a cryptocurrency bank, maybe they don't care. Maybe they allow me to be anonymous, right? And I can connect at a level 1. So again, in my system, to be at levels 2 and 3, your identity, to have a trusted identity, to be at levels 2 and 3, it has to be real ID, strong authentication, phishing resistant, multi-factor, bound. Bound means that your identity is bound to a device. Like if I'm going to use a FIDO YubiKey, I have to register this YubiKey to get my identity. And in this case, for levels 2 and 3, you'd have to show up in person to get it and prove your identity, have it attached to the device. Although they could also attach it to your laptop or to your phone as well. That could be bound means it's bound to one or more devices under your control. Unbound identities are kind of like login name and password. I can go to anybody's device with my login name and password and log on to any website that asks for my login name and password. Well, to be in levels 2 and 3, you have to be using bounded authentication. Again, you had to show up in person to receive it, and your identity or the device you use cannot be currently reported as compromised or confirmed to be involved in malicious actions. So you have to meet all those requirements to have a trusted identity for levels 2 and 3. Otherwise, you're in level 1. We also have to have safe and secure devices, because if a hacker can take over your computer or your device or your phone, they can fake being you. They can do things using your identity. So we need to make sure that our devices are secure as they can be. And we need to confirm that the devices have verified device identity, that it has a particular name and that it's the same device that I'm coming from every time. Because, most of the websites you connect to, most of the commercial websites, Amazon or your bank, if you connect from a different computer, like maybe you connect to them, usually you're from a Windows 11 laptop using Microsoft Edge. If one day you connect from an Apple device, your bank may say, hey, this is suspicious, and they may ask you to provide more authentication. So it's good for us to know, is this the same device or not? Because a lot of sites know that hackers are always trying to pretend to be you and your device, because they know that they'll be more readily accepted at your bank and the sites that you connect to if it appears as if they're coming from the same device. So we need to make sure that we have trusted, verified device identities and that those devices are safe and unmodified. And to do that, we need a trusted hardware chip, what's called a cryptographic root of trust chip, that stores and enforces the hardware integrity and the operating system integrity. And let me say, we don't have to invent this because you probably already have it. Most devices have had a cryptographic root of trust chip for a long, long time. The first one I ever remember was the Trusted Platform Module chip, TPM chip, that was created by the Trusted Computing Group as an open standard in 2003. And Microsoft started requiring it if you had an enterprise version of Windows starting with Windows Vista. So if you had an enterprise version of Windows and Windows Vista or later, that computer was required to have a TPM chip. Apple followed by what's called the Secure Enclave or T2 chip in 2012. And then Google, Chrome, and Pixels have had a similar chip called the Titan M2 chip since 2018. So most of the devices not every device, like your TV probably doesn't have it, but our phones and your computers and your iPads and stuff have these devices. And these devices support the integrity of the hardware. They don't allow the hardware to be modified in an unauthorized way. They don't allow the firmware to be modified in an unauthorized way. They don't allow the operating system, the core components of the operating system to be modified in an unauthorized way, or else they won't boot. And again, you've likely had these chips on your systems and you didn't even know it. So we don't have to invent anything for this part of it. We just have to make it more pervasive and make sure it's in every device. But we can also use those devices to create trusted, verified device identities. When you connect to most websites, they measure a lot of things about your computer to try to see if it's you. The most common thing is what's called a user agent string. When your computer connects to a website or service, it actually gives a lot of information, your operating system, the operating system version, patches, what browser you're using, and IP address and things like that. But user agent strings can be faked. The best way to identify is that device the same device is what's known as a device ID digital certificate that is burned on the secure chip, on the TPM chip or secure enclave chip or the Titan chip by the manufacturer of the device. And let me say, we don't have to invent this. This was actually already invented and released as an open standard by the Trusted Computing Group, but it's not used by most vendors. We'd have to tell the vendors, you need to start putting device ID digital certificates. And I got a mock-up here, right? This is like, it's on my laptop, and the Dell, when they made my Dell laptop, they gave it a name, Dell Latitude XPS, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they burned that device ID digital certificate into the TPM chip or Secure Enclave or Titan chip. That's the best way to do a trusted device identity. And again, those cryptographic root of trust chips, the TPM chip, the Secure Enclave, the M2 chip, Titan chip, they actually make sure, again, that your hardware has not been modified and that it is booting as expected. And it even protects the handoff to the operating system and the early parts of the operating system. And again, your hardware and software probably has already had this turned on if you didn't know it. If you have a Windows machine, if you can go into your BIOS or what's called your UEFI setup, you'll see an option called Secure Boot, and it's probably enabled, meaning that it's protecting your hardware, protecting your firmware from unauthorized modification, protecting the operating system. And Apple has one too. If you go into an Apple device and get into the startup security utility, you're going to see the Secure Boot option, and it's going to tell you that full security is on, because they have been protecting us for years and years and years, even if you didn't know it. And they've been very successful. It used to be when I joined cybersecurity 38 years ago that boot viruses were a big deal. And we had to tell people, make sure you pop out the floppy disk before you reboot. And there were things called rootkits that would take over your computer and modify your operating system. Those things have died out largely because of these trusted chips, these the TPM, the M2, the T2, and the M2 chips have largely protected the hardware, the boot process, and the operating system, the beginning parts of the operating system, whether you knew it or not. So this is not something we need to invent. And it's already enabled on almost everybody's devices. We would just have to make sure that it is enabled on every device and that we put it on our TVs and that everybody's phone has it and stuff like that. But in my system, to be at levels 2 and 3, your device would have to have a device ID digital certificate and a hardware enforced secure boot. And your device or node has not been currently reported as compromised or confirmed to be involved in malicious actions. If you don't have those things, you're in level 1. And let me say, I'm going to talk about a hypervisor from here on out. Hypervisor is a special area of memory set aside and protected from being hacked or from someone breaking out of the hypervisor into other areas of memory. Hypervisor is a special area of memory, again, that's set aside and protected. They were actually invented on mainframes in the 1960s. PCs started to use them when virtual machine software started coming out, VMware and hypervisor and Hyper-V and stuff like that. And most devices, your computers and your phones have hypervisors, one or more hypervisors that are protecting your operating system and your computer from hacking. And hypervisors can be software or hardware enforced, but hardware enforced hypervisor is much, much harder to hack. They can be hacked, but it's a lot harder. A hardware enforced hypervisor is difficult for a hacker to break into. And if they're inside of the hypervisor, it's very difficult for them to break out of it. And again, if you've had Apple or Windows, you've probably already had hardware enforced hypervisors for a long time. We started to get hardware enforced hypervisors back in Windows Vista and in Apple in 2012. So they've been around a long time. And again, if you go into your setup boot utility, you're going to see that you probably have Windows UEFI mode, which is this trusted hypervisor enforced. And actually, if you're on a Windows system, you can run a utility called MS Info 32, and that will bring up a lot of information about your Windows system. And if you go to the bottom, you'll see something called virtualization-based security. That is the hardware enforced hypervisors of Windows. And you can see that it protects many areas of memory, protects the boot process, protects some of the core device drivers and things like that. So again, most people using Windows have for years had this hardware enforced hypervisor. Same thing with Windows, same thing with Google Chrome, if they didn't even know that they had it. So we don't have to invent anything. We just have to make sure people have this sort of thing running. And let me say, Cubes OS. Cubes OS is a Linux-based operating system that has the best enforcement of hardware enforced hypervisors I've ever seen. I love Cubes. You can go to cubes-os.org and download it if you want. I use it. But it allows you, Cubes, if you run it, allows you to run different operating systems and different applications, each one in their own hardware enforced hypervisor. So like in this example here, I have a level 2 hypervisor where I'm running Windows 11 and Microsoft Word. Next to it, I have a level 3 hypervisor that's probably running OpenBSD in the Opera browser. And then, then I have 2 other level 1 hypervisors that are running. One's probably running some form of Linux, and the other one, the bottom one, is running Whonix, which is kind of it's built for anonymity and that sort of stuff. Cubes OS allows you to run any number of operating systems or applications, each in their own hypervisor. And and if a hacker breaks into one, they can't easily get into another. So I love Cubes OS. The only thing I don't like about Cubes OS is that it's Linux based, and that scares a lot of people away. But most operating systems, Windows and Apple, are trying to get to what Cubes OS has had for 10 years. They're trying to make it so that every application you run is in its own hardware enforced hypervisor. But Windows and Apple are not completely there yet, but they're trying to get there slowly over time. I'm a big fan of Cubes OS. So again, in my solution, in order for you to be in levels 2 and 3, you would have to have a hardware enforced OS secure boot, all the critical patches applied, and your node is not currently reported as being compromised or confirmed to be involved in malicious actions. And if you're not in that, you're in level 1. You also have to be running trusted apps. And again, this is something that kind of already exists for the most part today. If you have a Apple or Google phone, you have to go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store to get your applications. Those applications supposedly have been inspected by Google or Apple, and they're registered. And if an application developer is found to be doing something malicious or violating your privacy, Apple or Google will pull them out of the Apple and Google Play stores. I use the same concept, except for it applies to all devices, not just phones. And I have more secure checks, like I want the applications to have good self-checking so they can't be modified by a virus. I want them to run in hypervisors. I want them to have secure defaults and things like that. But in my system, in order for you to be in levels 2 and 3, you would have to be using a hardware enforced, hypervisor protected, digitally signed, trusted application that has not been reported as being used maliciously to be in levels 2 and 3. Otherwise, you're in level 1. And each of these applications would have to have trusted actions defined, meaning that all applications have things that are either considered high risk or low risk. Like when I go to my bank, Bank of America, and I look at my bank balance, that's considered kind of a low risk transaction. But if I go to transfer $10,000 to a new bank that I've never used before, that's considered a high risk transaction. In my system, that bank could define different high and low risk transactions. Say, okay, well, if Roger's coming to check his bank balance, he can come in with a level 1 application, level 1 identity. But if he goes to transfer $10,000, we're going to prompt him for his real ID and force him to go to level 2 or something like that. And let me say, this already kind of happens, even if you don't know it. Like if you go to Amazon to buy something, if you go to Amazon and say, buy toilet paper and send it to your home, Amazon will allow you to do that with one click. Click to buy. But if you're buying a high-priced electronic item, a TV, and you're shipping it to some other new address, Amazon is going to re-prompt you for your login name and password. They may send you an SMS code that you have to type in, because Amazon's defined you sending an expensive item to a new address as a high-risk transaction. Well, in order to be in my system, you would have to be running a trusted application that has these trusted actions defined, and that your action and app and computer have not been reported as being involved in malicious or unwanted activity. And let me say the same thing with the network, is that all of the computer security firms, Microsoft and Google and KnowBe4, we get lists every day from millions of people of phishing emails and ransomware attacks and stuff like that. And those entities, Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter and KnowBe4 and Google, we kind of know where the dirty networks are and where the clean networks are. In my system, you would have to originate your computer and your connection would have to originate from a trusted, safe network. If you were coming across an untrusted network, you would end up being in level 1 instead of level 2 or 3. And let me say, everything that I've described so far already exists. We just have to agree to use it and use it in a particular way. Here's the new thing. This is the only new thing that I'll introduce tonight, called the Trust Assurance Service. And I call it kind of like DNS, but for internet security. But in my system, every node that wants to be in level 1 or level 2 or 3 would have to be running a local trust assurance service that connects to the global trust assurance service. The local trust assurance service kind of manages all of these trust assurance levels and real IDs and things like that, helps set up new connections, manages incoming connections. And let me say, most people in my system would not have to do anything, would never even know this local trust assurance service exists, unless they wanted to modify something or they were doing something that was kind of risky. Like in my system, suppose you're running Microsoft, this is kind of a fake mock-up. Suppose you're running Microsoft Outlook. And in this case, the local trust assurance service says, hey, you're running Microsoft Outlook. It's a level 2 high trust application. You're running it with the identity Roger G at Banneret CS. That's a real ID level 2 identity bound. But if I wanted to, I could run another instance of Outlook with another identity or another level. I could say, oh, I want to use, level 1 Roger Grimes at gmail.com or level 1 attempted anonymity. So the local trust assurance service would allow you to start other instances of your same applications and services bound to other personas if you wanted that. And if I was running a service and someone tried to connect with a different level, it might warn me. Like in this mock-up example, I'm running Microsoft FTP server with my level 2 identity Gmail account, and it's all level 2. But in this example, mock-up example, somebody's trying to connect to me, but not using all things level 2. They're connecting to me with a level 2 identity, Trisha L at Banner, that's my wife, connecting to me, but she's using a level 1 application, WinSCP FTP client. It's a very popular FTP client, but I'm just making an example that it's level 1. And because it's not level 2, the local trust assurance service pops up and says, do you want to allow once for the connection, allow it permanently, or deny it? And remember what you chose. And let me say, one of the biggest things the local trust assurance service does is for every email address, phone number, file name, URL, or content that someone sends you, it is automatically, without you needing to do it, submitted to the Global Trust Assurance Service, a hash of it, to see whether or not it's been reported as malicious. And it also allows anybody to report something as being malicious. So if you receive an email, let's say Roger A. Grimes 66 at Gmail, that could be reported automatically to the Global Trust Assurance Service. If that email address has never been reported as being used malicious, it would come back wrapped in green. If it has been reported as being used and confirmed as being used maliciously, it would come back in red. And if it was reported as being used as malicious, but has not yet been confirmed, it would be in yellow. And every single thing submitted to you would automatically, if you allow it, be submitted to the Global Trust Assurance Service and mark it in red, green, or yellow. And like, let's suppose you had an email. Suppose you and I were doing business all the time through Gmail, and you were using my Gmail and it was wrapped in green. But one day my account gets compromised and a hacker starts using it. Someone reports it. It might automatically show up as yellow. And then you would know that I've been compromised.
Well,
And
it's
again,
7 o'clock now, Roger. Thanks.
okay. I'm sorry. I thought I had an hour and a half total.
No, just 1 hour. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so I'm at the very end. I'm
Yeah.
at the
So
very end of my
yeah,
talk.
some of
You
us
would need
can
all those
stay.
things to
So
be in
yeah.
there. Do we have time for questions?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think do you know how to use the chat, or do you want me to?
I'll look in the chat as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You can scroll them all the way to the top. Yeah. So all the questions are in there. So
So how the dynamic websites get created? It's all kinds of different software. It's services, and it's usually scripts that create them, and they're in dynamically hosted DNS domains, so they get dynamic names on the fly. They're usually TLS protected. They use Let's Encrypt to get their TLS certificates, and it's all generated using scripts, usually Python scripts or something like that. But it's different per website and service. Um, let's see. Is the reason why physical robbery is less than virtual robbery is easier? Again, I think the reason why virtual robbery is easier is that people can pretend to be, they don't have to identify themselves, and they're not likely to get arrested ever. So I can do it over and over again and get arrested. Naivete is a big problem, yes. Although I think that our internet system is so badly designed that even if you're a smart person, you can be scammed. Anybody can be scammed with the right scam. And if you get to install a piece of software, you can be compromised. So it's bigger than that. Is this the same as blockchain consensus? My solution does not require blockchain, but it could use blockchain. It could be part of the solution. But blockchain is actually a very cryptographically expensive solution. It actually doesn't scale very well. It's very expensive cryptographically. So my system and solution doesn't have to use blockchain, but it could. And in some cases for identity and things like that, it might be a good thing. Let's see. So these cryptographic trust chips are not usually standard on Windows consumer devices. Good question. So it used to be that they were not standard on, if you had a home version of Windows, you typically did not have a TPM chip. But if you have Windows 11, Windows 11 started to require all versions of Windows, including consumer versions, to have a TPM chip. So today, Windows 11 and above, for sure, you have a TPM chip. And certainly Apple and Google have been requiring the Secure Enclave and Titan chips for everything they sell. The device ID verification could be combined with UBA to provide good identity. Yes. In my solution, though, you could have all kinds of good identity providers. You wouldn't have one identity provider or one type of identity provider, but they would have to meet a preset of audit. It's in the book. The book goes into more detail. I even have packet level stuff for everything in the book. But anybody could be a trusted identity service provider as long as they met particular controls and allowed themselves to be audited to make sure those controls are enforced. And that's like it is in the real world today. There's, KnowBe4 could have strong identification. Our DMV has strong authentication. Our passport office has strong authentication. So I don't think it needs to be one service or one site. It could be many different ones. Let's see. Someone said, are there any KnowBe4 products that are suitable for small business? Yes. The majority of our customers are small business customers. I don't sell, I'm not a KnowBe4 salesperson, but if you send me an email at rogerg@knowbe4.com, I'll get you in contact with the salesperson and talk to you. What is your opinion of government keeping biometric database for level 3 assurance? I don't like biometric identities at all. The reason why is that they're very prone to failure. They're not, they'll say, oh, your fingerprint's unique in the world. Your fingerprint may be unique in the world, but how it is scanned, stored, and confirmed and recompared is not unique in the world. When I give lectures, sometimes I take my cell phone, which is unlocked by my fingerprint, and I pass it around in the conference hall. I rarely get to the 30th person before my phone unlocks with some stranger's fingerprint. Windows Hello. Lots of people email me and say their baby walked by and it unlocked their Windows Hello. And when someone told me, oh, my best friend unlocks it. And when you look at the babies and you look at the best friend, they don't look like the person. They look a little bit like them, not a lot, but Windows Hello thinks. And you can't tell Windows Hello or any of these biometric identities don't accept that person's face or that person's fingerprint. There's no way to tell it not to accept it. In America, the NIST, what's called Digital Identity Framework, Digital Identity Guidelines, that's NIST Special Publication 800-63, says if you use a biometric identity, it must be paired with a hardware key like a YubiKey. And a YubiKey is accepted by itself. So they're really saying they don't trust the biometric identity at all. The biggest problem with biometric identities is that once they're compromised, your DNA, your face, your fingerprints, they're everywhere. And if a hacker steals your fingerprint or your face or whatever, what are you going to do? You can't change your face. I can update my password. I can update my YubiKey. I can update my SMS certificate or whatever. I can't update my face or my fingerprints or my voice print. And they're not secrets. And let me say right now, there's already a virus. There's already malware in Asia and South Korea and Vietnam, in order to transfer $10,000 or more, they require facial identity. There has already, since last year, been malware that captures people's faces, does a deep fake of them, and then steals their money at their bank. So biometrics, I don't mind biometrics if it's paired with a second factor. I do not like single factor biometrics. Let's see. And I'm not, let me say, I'm not a huge fan of the government keeping biometric identities overall, but all kinds of privacy issues. But how would you get the initial uptake for this? Early adopters. I've been trying to get this adopted for 20 years. It's not gone anywhere. I'm convinced that it will take a radical tipping point event, like a 9/11 type event happening to the internet. The internet will have to go down for a day, or someone won't be able to buy Taylor Swift tickets for 2 hours, something catastrophic like that. The world will panic, and then they will start to implement better forms, because nothing ever gets implemented until there's a tipping point event. We don't do anything right until there's blood on the ground. I think it's going to take the same thing on the internet.
I have a question, by the way, a little bit nuanced. So you mentioned things about cybercrime, and I've noticed that it's mostly international. How are there some countries that have very strict laws about crime in general? So I'd like to know the difference between domestic cybercrime, you're in Iran or something, and you hack the government or try to, and then you get in serious trouble, versus you're in Iran or whatever, you try to hack America or Canada or something like that.
Yeah, I do think Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and stuff like that. They really discourage local domestic crime, but they either don't mind international crime or they seem to actually encourage it. Like China says, oh, we don't allow hacking, but I've been in China for many months of my life, for years. And China has the great Chinese firewall that people often bypass, but they kind of know where everybody's going and what they're doing. out of everybody, China knows who's hacking, right? So for them to say, well, we don't know about this hacking, is just a ludicrous thing. And then North Korea, it's a nation state thing where they actually encourage it. Russia's the same way. Like Russia thinks most ransomware comes from Russia and Ukraine. And I think they like that America has to deal with it, right? First of all, it's a increase in money to their economy because the ransomware gangs are spending the money in their country. They many times take bribes because of it. Romance scams, credit card scams, that drives it drives huge industries in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Indonesia and Malaysia. They literally have, tremendous large call centers that are the largest employers in their cities. So there's a lot of financial incentives to allow different countries to allow them to hack other countries. And on top of that, it's just a legal jurisdiction problem. Again, in America, even if China and Russia said go arrest Roger because he's hacking, they're not going to do it. It's just a very difficult thing to arrest somebody in another country, even if there's the best of intentions. And I think many times there isn't the best of intentions between countries.
Okay. Oh yeah, that was pretty amazing. Do you have any books that compare like domestic versus international cybercrime, like any references or sources? I may ask you in email later.
Yeah. Send me an email to Roger G at KnowBe4. I didn't write a book, but I do know some books that cover those topics. There's just one getting ready to come out by a really famous reporter. I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'm actually registered to get it on Amazon. It's just getting ready to come out, and it covers international versus domestic crime and just talks about how they use it to launder money and all that sort of stuff. It's going to be a fantastic book.
So just to let
Thank
you
you.
guys know, if you guys want to reach out to Roger, his contact and LinkedIn information are in the program. So feel free to reach out to him. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Roger for an excellent presentation. And there's a lot of wealth of information. Oh, there you go in the chat. You can reach out to him in his email address. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to sit through, late at night already, the presentation. Hopefully you guys get a lot of knowledge out of it. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming out, and thank you, Roger, and thank you everyone else. So have a great night. If you want to stay back, you can stay back a little bit. If not,
Thank
have
y'all,
a
everyone. Thank y'all for having me.
thank you
And
everyone. So I'm gonna stop the
fight
recording
fight
now.
the good fight.